G'day and welcome to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. Today we're going to start our positional breakdown. We are talking defenders and we're starting right at the top talking about the premiums. Let's go!
Hodge has done it from nowhere. Hoisting the goal from inside the 30. Sheed from the boundary. Dusty.
G'day and welcome again to the Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Casey, and you can find me on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, at Ball Boys Fantasy. And I am joined by the coach of the mighty Oxlong, the reigning premiers of the Content Creators Cup, Luke.
Keep it coming, mate. I like that. Every podcast from
every
here on.
podcast for the rest of the year until it's different.
Yeah.
Which might be another year after that. Who knows? After your bold prediction.
Let's go. Last episode was more of a kind of just a chit chat, wasn't it? Get to know each other. But today we need to stop fucking around. We need to get into it.
We're going into the meat. We're getting into the potatoes.
Okay.
Not that kind of meat. Settle down, Luke. But yeah, we're talking defenders. We're talking player specific. We've got a list of players that we're going to get through today. And the defense is it's the tough line, a lot of people are saying. Are you finding that? I think we spoke about this briefly, but hard to find the value options like you might find in the forwards and the mids.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to try and unpack it today, but you're spot on. I think most people are finding that the forwards are kind of picking themselves for the most part, and defense is potentially where we're going to differentiate some teams, I think.
Yep, 100%. Now, before we get into some specific players, I've done an early, and not to flag any copyrights or anything like that, a little bit of a scale of hardness.
Oh, that's straight plagiarism, mate.
No. It's different to the scale of hardness.
Oh, right.
This is just a straight up scale of hardness.
You reckon you got them on a loophole?
Yeah, big loophole there.
I'll be encouraging the boys to sue.
Not much money to sue, really.
Take it for all I'm worth.
So the teams that have a positive run, and we'll keep this in mind when we're talking about some of these guys.
Okay.
Port Adelaide have no tough matchups in their first 6 games, and 3 what I would call easy matchups in Collingwood,
Succulent.
Richmond, and St Kilda's definitely of the succulent variety. Another team that has a good run of games is Brisbane, who have some good matchups. Now, they have the early bye in week 3, but they have Sydney West Coast, but then they go on a run of Richmond, the Bulldogs, and Collingwood, which are 3 green teams in a row. And Freo have a decent run as well. So they have Geelong and Sydney West Coast, which, especially Freo versus West Coast, usually a pretty heated game. That's probably their only tough one for defenders. But then Bulldogs, Richmond, and Gold Coast, 3 games in a row. So they've got 4. They're the only team with 4 green teams on the scale in the first 6. The ones with the hard matchups, St Kilda have, they've got a up and down. They've got 3 greens and they've got 3 reds. So it's a bit up and down for them. Sydney suck. They don't have very many good matchups, except for Collingwood in week 5. And West Coast have a really good matchup in round 1 against the Gold Coast, but then they go 4 hard teams in a row. So we'll keep that in mind when it comes to the premiums there. But obviously, this is based on last year's data as well, so it might be a little bit different starting off this year. But yeah, something to keep in mind.
You have been hard at work, mate.
Always hard at work, never stop, mate. Never stop. But why don't we talk about the top of the tree when it comes to... We won't highlight one particular player, but we'll go through the top maybe sort of 5 or 6 guys in Harry Sheasel, Dane Zorko, Sam Flanders, Nick Martin. All these guys are the top here. Are there any defenders at the very top of the price? Lockie Whitfield, Nick Newman, Luke Ryan, Sinclair. Are there any players there that you like the look of or specifically really don't like and you could never see yourself starting? Just as a general look at it first.
I think when I look at some of those names you rattled off, for me at this stage, it's a no. There's not enough guys that I can sell. We talked a little bit about this, I think, last year, where we talked about the narrative behind a player. When you have a look at the player, have a look at the circumstance that they're in, what narrative can you sell yourself that there's potential value there, that there's some more points on the table for them? And for these particular guys that you just rattled off, there's not many there that I can see the narrative with. A lot of guys that outperform what we even expected last year. to do that again this year, I think would be a little bit risky to predict.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I have the same opinion, but there are some highly owned guys here. So if I go through sort of the top sort of 7 or 8 players, the unique ones are Zorko, Nick Newman, Luke Ryan are uniquely owned. Nick Martin's also not very highly owned either. But Harry Sheezel, for example, the most expensive player, he's at 40% owned. Lockie Whitfield is at 14%, so he's got a bit of ownership there. Flanders is at 20%. Another really popular one that I see getting around a lot is Jack Sinclair. He's at 19% as well.
Do you think?
Let's talk about those guys specifically, and why do we think that they're highly owned, like Sheezel, Whitfield, Flanders, and Sinclair, and should you exercise caution starting these guys?
I think there could be a temptation when you've got a line where you're really not seeing any of that like undervalued premium type value. You sort of just say to yourself, I think, oh well, I'll just grab this guy. I think he's the best of the bunch, and a lot of people are even talking about money left over after they're putting their teams together. And sometimes I think...
Where are these people at? I never have money left over. What's going on?
I think
these people getting extra money?
Hey, we all got a little bit extra money this year, but I think there's a little temptation there to just go, oh, I'll just lock that away. I mean, talk a little bit about Harry Sheezel in particular.
Well, Harry Sheezel is a guy that, of all of those options, I see him as the most viable one to start, personally. Now, he started last year going nuts, right? He had the 120, I want to say 125. I've got my notes here. Yeah, 125 in his first 7 games, and moved to a mid-forward round in round 8. From that point on, he averaged 105. So straight away you go, okay, he's priced 112. There's 7 points of downside. However, that was on 46% CBAs. I would expect him to play more than that.
Yep.
He played a lot of games where he was definitely forward first, then a midfielder, like kind of almost pinch hitting in the midfield. In games where he was more than 40% CBAs, he averaged 113.6. So a tiny incy bit of value on his 112 there. And if he does that, I can see him being in like a tier on his own in terms of the number 1 defender. And that's a captain option as well. So when you're paying, this is like a little rule, an unofficial rule that I have. If you're going to pay over 100 for a player, you have to be comfortable putting the captaincy on them.
Okay.
And I think on this list, Sheezel, maybe Whitfield are the only 2 that I think I'd be comfortable doing so early in the season. What are your thoughts on that? And do you disagree with Sheezel being a guy that should maintain?
Sheezel, I think there's a small narrative there that you can sell, which is the increase in CBAs we've seen in short patches that he's been able to go nuts. Whitfield for me is top dollar.
Yeah, he's never done anything like last year.
Exactly, and he's going to play that role again.
He's got an early buy.
Yep, I think that for me that's enough to say no to Whitfield. And there were even some little flags there. You mentioned a guy like Flanders. There were even a little bit of a flag there at the end of the season with his role. So Sheezel, maybe. Does he get
so I think with all these guys,
if
you're questionable about the upside, Whitfield, Flanders, Nick Martin, Zorko have all got an early buy. Like they've all got an early buy. So I think you can basically like put a line through all of them, at least the way I would play. So then you're left with, okay, Sheezel, you're left with Nick Newman, you're left with Luke Ryan and Jack Sinclair. Nick Newman's 32, so that's over my 30 rule. You've got Doherty coming back in. He's also lowly owned. Luke Ryan, no, we're just not going there. So the other one, which we haven't talked about, is Sinclair. Well, I see a lot of like other content creators talking about him being like their D1. Would you rather have a Sinclair in your team or a Sheezel in your team if you had to pick one of the 2? Like say you were of the mindset, okay, I want a guy who I think can be top 6 in their line. I don't want anyone with an early buy around. I personally think Sheezel and Sinclair are not as likely to go backwards as some of the others. I don't think I see much upside in either. So do you just go the cheaper guy, or do you go the guy that you could potentially put a C on, which I think is Sheezel?
I think I'd go Sheezel in that situation.
That's
if
my
I'm going to pick my D1.
Yeah. Because I think that's where you can establish quote-unquote value. You're not getting 1 of Sheezel, you're potentially getting 2 of Sheezel.
Yeah.
As a decent option. But obviously with a high price tag comes higher risk. So, but The other question is, do you have to have any of these guys?
Are there many defenders? What's he priced at? She's 112. Is that right?
112, yeah.
Are there many defenders that have gone back-to-back 112 seasons? Not many. No, I don't think so. Like last year, who would have been the most expensive defender? I can't even remember. It would have been Nick Dacos, who's obviously a midfielder now. And he was priced at 108. He went 105. And that's Nick Dacos. Doherty potentially in any seasons? Would he?
Doherty back in the day, he did.
But all I'm saying is it's probably an anomaly. Does he get more attention from teams this year? So there's just none of those names I look at and go, bang, that's 5 to 10 points of upside.
Yeah.
Should we kind of get into the guys that maybe do present
I think
upside?
so. I just wanted to finish on the point, like, I don't feel, because I think a lot of people, like you said, you mentioned this, a lot of people feel the need or the temptation, I've got to get this guy who's going to be top 6. I've got to get this guy, he's going to be in the, the best defender. I don't think you have to do that. If you don't see anyone improving on their price, like, for example, and this is why I'm pretty against the Sinclair pick, if you're just picking him because he's got a good mid-season buy and he's not going to go down, that's to me not good enough, because either you need to be able to put a captaincy on him, you're paying up for a captain. So the Sheasel argument, I see a little bit more validity to it. Or you need to see them having upside. And I don't think Sinclair ticks either of those boxes. So I'm pretty against starting a player like that if that's what you think of the player. Now, if you think Sinclair's got upside, then go for it. I personally don't. So this next little tier, we're going to start with Dan Houston. And we talked a bit about him on the other podcast, but let's go into a bit more detail. What have you researched and found on Dan Houston, and do you think he's a potential starting option?
I think he is in the right role, but I probably have more questions than answers with Dan Houston. I kind of want to know why has he been so inconsistent at Port Adelaide? Because he's a guy he's a guy that we know can give you 150s, but in the same breath he'll drop a 50 the next week. Is that something to do with the role he's playing at Port Adelaide, the way Port Adelaide play, and then if he gets a similar halfback role at Collingwood, is it more consistent? The other little sort of thing that I have here is, if you go back and have a look at Collingwood's highest scorers for the year, last year,
there's not many.
No.
First of all.
So you take the 2 Dacos boys, and I think Darcy Cameron, I think that's your top 3.
Yeah.
And then immediately you might drop down to, is it Jack Crisp? I think
I think
you dropped down to,
right.
and he averaged like 83 or something like that. So are we expecting Houston to go into this team and go, bang, I'm in the top 2 scorers? Because that's what we need him to do in order to be value. Yeah.
And if I look at, so you're comparing Collingwood and Port Adelaide, right? Collingwood were dead last when it came to marks in total.
Yeah.
And also dead last in uncontested marks. Port Adelaide were actually right up there, which is a bit different than normal to them. They usually are down low as well, but they were at 95 total marks to Collingwood's 81. So the argument of going to a different team, Port Adelaide you don't often think of as like a high fantasy team, but in this particular area of the ground, is it actually a worse position, or is it the fact that Collingwood had no one there and they didn't have the talents to score the points? And Dan Houston is clearly that. Like, he's clearly a good player.
Yeah. I think
is he going to command more of the market share in that position? So
unless Collingwood's game plan changes drastically, I think what they want more of is they want more bounce. They want more Isaac Quainer. They want more, Jack Crisp,
run and dash,
run and carry, that kind of thing. I don't think, and Houston can provide that, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that is conducive for waxy wax.
3 points, yeah. It's not a chip to you, chip back to me, go run up the next 45, get the next ball.
Yeah. Maybe this one is one of those tricks where we go, new club, relevant-ish fantasy player, there must be a new club bump. But maybe there's some statistics suggesting the other way.
Yeah, I think similar. This one, it strikes me as like a hope kind of a play. Like, you're picking him hoping that the new club is going to be the ticket he needs to be better. And he's already priced at 94, so he's not cheap.
Yeah.
You're wanting him to go nearly 100 plus at this price point. And I think that there is a world that it happens, but I think it's just as equal that he actually goes backwards. So for me, it's going to take a fair bit for me to start him in my side. I'd have to see a fair bit in the preseason and in round 0. And in fact, we forgot to mention this last time. He won't be there in round 0 because he's suspended.
Yeah, someone helped us out on the comments there. We got carried away with that.
Yeah, we got carried away. So that's going to make it even more of a tough call. In fact, not being able to see him in that opening round is it's like a 1% chance. I think I start with him.
It could,
but there's a world I think he is a good pick if you truly believe in that. So, but I think it's more about a hope kind of a play. Let's talk about another guy that is in 1%. I'm going to just double check this. Oh, no, he's in 2% of teams. Last time I checked, he was 1%.
I want to throw it to you because I know you've got some thoughts here and I really don't have too many thoughts. So I'm an open book on this. Sell me on Bailey Dale, Mitch.
Bailey Dale. So the narrative here is he got bevoed. A lot of players have been bevoed before. It was his turn last season.
Yeah.
He rode the pine early in the year and came on as a sub vest. The game before, he also lined up in the forward line as well, just because, I don't know, bevo. So the game before, he lined up in the forward line, scored a 47. The next game, he wore the green vest, played 30% time on ground, and got a 14.
150. The next
and then
week?
after that, well, not even that, 160.
160.
And from that point on, after he wore the vest, he went on to average 97.5.
Okay.
He's priced at 92. Okay, so he's priced at 92, 950,000. So I think it's pretty safe to say I expect him to be about a 97 at least. The other thing that also coincided during that time is you had a player like Ed Richards go from a player in defense to playing a bit more time in the midfield. So that player that is a bit of competition in that part of the ground is no longer there.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't so much an issue last season, but in seasons gone past, it's also been Caleb Daniel that's been eating into those points. You've had players like Jason Johannesson, Caleb Daniel, Ed Richards, and Bailey Dale all kind of like fighting for points in the Bulldogs defense line. And a lot of people have made the arguments in times, and I've agreed with it, that there's too many mouths to feed there. A lot of those mouths are fed. They're gone. Yeah. So Bailey Dale is now the guy there. Like, he to me strikes me as the Bulldogs version of Lachie Whitfield. He's their quarterback. And he's a good player. He did have some lower scores in the back of the year where he started to get a bit of attention. For example, there's this game, I went to look at it. It's against Adelaide in round 22 where he randomly dropped a 45. I don't really have an explanation as to why. But if you remove that random 45 game, he's averaging 100 plus. I need to go back and watch that game as to why. I'm pretty sure Adelaide just destroyed the Dogs that game, which could obviously happen again. But outside of that game, he's got a pretty consistent 90 to 110 average most games, with the occasional ceiling score 160, 134 in back-to-back games. So there's something there. He's by no means locked into my side, but it is someone at 2% owned, no early buy, little bit of upside, potential to be a top 6 defender. I think needs to be at least discussed.
Yeah, I think you're a good salesman there. It's he's not somebody that I have considered up until this point, but the case that you make is a pretty good one.
The only thing I will say, going back to that scale of hardness, is the Bulldogs' run is not the best. They open up against North, which normally you'd think is a good thing. Defenders, it's actually quite a bad thing. They're one of the harder matchups for defenders. Collingwood's a good matchup, but then they go Carlton, Freo, Brisbane, which are all tough-ish matchups. No Reds, no GWS, but then they get St Kilda in round 6. So
you're willing to wait that long?
Yeah, that's the thing. And could you just trade into him before the St Kilda matchup as maybe your first upgrade after maybe comes off a couple of tougher ones? It's another option, but I still think he's a bit of value regardless. So the run isn't what I'd love to see, but I still think he's an option. And if you haven't considered him, I think you should at least look into it.
Can you check the fan back up to 2?
You're sweating like crazy in here?
My eyeballs are sweating, I reckon.
Okay. All right. Well, I've talked about Bailey Dale. Do you want to talk to me about this next guy from Geelong who had a bit of a funny season last year?
He did have a funny season, Tom Stewart, and there's definitely a few games in that season that bring the value down a little bit. So I think that there is
sucked for ages.
There was a patch there where it figured that it sort of seemed as though teams had worked him out, didn't it?
Yes.
And then there was a really nice period where he had a role change, and that was good for owners. But
he also had an injured score of 26 in his second last game. or the last game of the regular season. He's had a few injured scores actually here. He's got 3 injured scores, one at 76, one at 47, and one at 26.
Yeah,
so some inbuilt value there, obviously.
I think there's some inbuilt value, but there's something about this one that just I feel like Tom Stewart's had his day. I feel like in terms of our fantasy relevance, he's obviously getting a little bit older now. And then the other thing that concerns me as well is if he goes to halfback and again teams play that sort of aggressive forward role on him, I don't think he has as much luxury to just move into the midfield now. So yeah, you obviously got Holmes that's cemented a spot in there, and you're going to add.
Oh, has he? Is that? Are we like because he was everywhere last year?
If I was coaching them, I would have Holmes
I would too.
in my midfield.
He's younger.
You've got Bailey Smith, who we expect to go in there as well. So just maybe that takes away from Tom Stewart's flexibility. And if you ask me, is Tom Stewart concerned about fantasy points or just doing everything he needs to do to make the team win?
No, I mean, that's what they're about over Geelong.
It is. Sometimes that coincides with big scores. Yeah. I'll acknowledge that. But I think Tom Stewart's petering off our fantasy relevance.
So he had 8 games before he got injured at 26 where he was getting CBAs. And we're not talking like 40, 30, 40% CBAs. His first game in the middle, 83%, 72%, 85%, 68%, 66%. In that time, he averaged 107 points in 78% time on ground. Like that's big time.
Yeah.
Great points per minute. But if you're averaging 107 of those 8 games and you're coming in priced at 87,
something's gone wrong.
The other role was not very good.
No.
So again, I see a wide range of outcomes, and I would predict with Bailey Smith coming in that he's not going to play those CBAs that he was in that 8-game stretch.
Yeah.
At least not to the degree that he was. Like, for example, when they played their one and only finals game, he had 13% CBAs. Like, I can see that, 13 to 30% kind of just going in there, maybe to break a tag or they need something different or I don't know. But I don't see the 80 or 70% where he was doing before. And do you think that, he's just like an 80, 90 guy?
Yeah, I think he can be a mid-90s guy, but, I mean, even mid-90s, I'd really have to
he's got the dreaded round 3.
I'd have to convince myself to go there. So at this stage, not for me.
I think I'd bump him up from the 87 in draft. I think I can see him being a 90 player, just because he's historically done that. You've got those injured games. The potential of him to be the inside mid is great, but yeah, the buy kills him, I think. What about from an old player to a younger guy?
Yeah.
Colby McKercher.
The Kirch.
Now, we love the second-year halfbacks at North Melbourne. Harry Sheasel was very, very kind to us last year.
He was indeed.
And if you didn't start Harry Sheasel, you were off to a very painful start at the beginning of the season. Is Colby McKercher, is it as simple as saying just Sheasel part 2? Or are we oversimplifying this
That's
a bit?
too much to ask, isn't it? The fantasy gods wouldn't let it be that simple for us.
Yeah, it wouldn't be that simple.
That's what
I'd love it to be. But what do we see from him? He's priced at 82.
Yeah.
845,000. He does have I want to say he scored like a 1 or a 2.
Yeah, there's an injured game in there late in the season, I think. I think you're right.
I'm going to pull it up.
On that one.
But yeah, what do we see happening from him? Where do we actually see him playing? So Caleb Daniels obviously here now. Is he playing halfback? Is he going up to a wing? And do we care?
I think we do care.
Yes.
To sort of answer the second question first, if we expect Sheasel to play more midfield time, I don't think there's much midfield time yet for McKercher. I think he will get some.
Like centre bounce mid-time.
Yeah, I think he will get some because
he's too small, like from the eye at this stage compared to the other options.
I think he's still a gun, and I think he'll still see time in there, but is he going to see time that makes it succulent for us? Perhaps not. I still probably see him playing off halfback. I think he and Daniel in tandem off halfback is not a bad look for them.
I can see him going a little bit more onto a wing, potentially. I think he can still score solid on a wing, but I don't think it's going to be where his ceiling scores come from.
You're not picking a winger to confidently average more than 82.
Yeah, so a lot of people will point to his last...
Errol Gulden.
Yeah, he's a gun. His last 7 games, he averaged 94 points on 80% time on ground.
Yep.
You pick him and he goes 94, price at 82. That's a pretty solid pick. Is it enough?
I think it is on that line.
I think it is too. I think he goes 94, 95. That's a good pick.
He's going to be in the top 10 defenders, you would think, roughly.
Be within the ballpark, yeah.
Yeah. I think it is. Do I have the confidence that he goes 92? No. Can he convince me in preseason games and what we see coming out of the club? Yeah.
Yeah. If I take out that 2, he averaged 87.7, so 88. I think that's a reasonable floor.
He's a second-year player. We've been so spoiled.
Yeah, there's been so many good young players coming through, isn't there?
Like
how many can North Melbourne themselves have? You know, how many can they fit?
The luxury of just going second-year Dacos, second-year Sheasel. I don't think the run continues. If I'm a betting man, I'm going to say Colby's not going to absolutely blow us off the park this year. This
is where you start to think about market share and like, okay, well, what's your opinion on Sheasel? What's your opinion on Caleb Daniel? What's your opinion on Tristan Sherry? How many guys in your North Melbourne can you see going 90, 95, 100 plus? And I don't think you could say 4 of them are going 95 plus. I can't see North Melbourne having 4 95 plus averaging players.
Last year they had 3. And LDU was one of them. Sherry, Sheasel.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even mention LDU.
The next guy down is Fisher at 82. So do you suddenly expect? Yeah,
is Fisher? Is he? I'd imagine he's still there. Like, is he still getting games, or is he out completely?
Oh, there was a couple of times where he got dropped and vested last year.
He did.
Hey,
very interesting.
If you bring in Caleb Daniel, yeah,
I'm not ruling Colby McKercher out of my side just yet. I think he's definitely on the short list. No early buy.
Yeah,
young player. I mean, if you just take out the 2, he averages 88 on 80% time on ground. I can see that time on ground going up 2 or 3%.
Yeah,
that sort of gets you to 90-ish.
And we know he's a ball magnet.
He's a ball magnet. Yeah, he's got the pedigree.
He ticks every box. It's just a matter of whether in his second year he can do all those things.
Yeah, 100%. They start with the Bulldogs, which is a great matter. Their runs, I would say, middle of the pack. Middle of the pack to slightly positive. So no real concerns there.
Yeah.
So I think he's definitely an option. I was a bit skeptical when I first sort of saw people going there. He's at 16.5% owned. But I think it's definitely one we can have a closer look on. I want to see him on the halfback. I don't want to see much wing. That's the main thing for me.
Yeah.
If I see him like moving up to the wing, even just like 50-50, I think that's enough for me to drop him back. But if he's like him and Caleb Daniel are like splitting the kick-ins and it's just those 2, then I think there's enough for me to maybe have a look at it compared to some of the other options.
Yeah, that wing role could McKercher.
Okay.
That was,
it was all right.
That was all right.
No. I didn't see it coming, so I wasn't quite ready. But anyway, let's move on from that, and we're going to go to another. Oh, I can't link the 2. But we're going to Sick Dog. We're going to Sick Dog, and he hurts a lot of people sometimes, both good and bad. I think he's a very interesting player.
I'm really interested to discuss here because I haven't heard. Am I listening to the wrong podcast? But I haven't heard much about the Sick Dog at all.
Yeah. Let me give you a little. He's in my team right now.
Okay. You stole my pick then, you prick.
Well, there you go.
Wait, that's I sent you a screenshot. You absolutely nicked my team.
That's a good idea, Luke. But he's 8% owned. He's priced at 87. He is a player that previously has comfortably been a 90-plus guy, sometimes 100-plus. The big thing for him is the acquisitions that Hawthorn made in the offseason.
100%. This is a narrative. I don't understand why more people are not high on him. And everything we say, we know he has an early buy. So we can address that in a second.
But he's got the late buy with Essendon, am I right in saying that?
We can address the buy in a second.
We're not picking Essendon players, are we? I can't think of a single Essendon player that I'm picking. So
the rookie in defence. But this... Yeah. I mean, there's so many reasons I think to pick the Sick Dog.
Yeah, so they're bringing in Tom Barrass.
Yep.
And they're bringing in, who else are they bringing in? I've forgotten. It's a good question. I wrote it down. Hold on, I'll pull it up. But basically two key defenders, essentially.
They've got an embarrassment of riches in the backline now.
Nice. Josh Battle. Oh, that's the guy that they sent two first-round draft picks for.
Battle's a rich area. I'll work on something. I'll be back with you.
Okay, so you've got Battle and Barrass. You got it in my head now. Tom Barrass coming in. So this obviously frees up Sicily. Or does it free him up too much and they have too many defenders that he goes forward?
Well, I listened to Sam Mitchell talk on 3AW. This is a little while back, but he said the question was, where does Sicily play? And the answer was...
He didn't give us a straight answer, did he?
No, he said back.
Okay. Oh, that's good.
With the capacity to go forward.
Not good.
That to me is what he did this year. He primarily played back, and then he pinch hits.
It was like
forward.
late in the quarters, like in the fourth quarters, he'd do that. Sometimes it wasn't like a second half go forward.
Why would you not keep James Sicily in your back line? Yes, you've got key defenders, but you never wanted James Sicily to be a key defender. He's an elite ball user.
He's an intercept marker.
He's a third tall. He's an intercept marker. So it's not like you go, oh, we had him as an elite defender, a key defender, and now we've got all these key defenders. See you later, James. Go forward. They want him to be a third tall option. They want him to sit on Terry top up in the fucking forward pocket and go, fuck you, mate. I'm across here.
I'm gonna get this.
You little ripper. I think early days. It's the 6th of January, but I'm big-ish on Sicily. I think that he obviously was nursing a shoulder injury for the latter half of the year as well, which I think impacted him.
That first round, so in the first game of last season, he scored a filthy 30, which, when you're looking at his season, it's an obvious outlier.
Yeah.
If I took that 30 out, which, we can do, he averaged 91 last season. So that seems more like Sicily. Since Carl Amon has moved into the back line, which I was a little bit concerned about, okay, well, how's that look? He's averaged 93.5.
Okay.
So without him going forward too much or any more than he did last year, I kind of see that as his flaw.
Yeah.
Like 93. And if you have the potential that he goes sort of that 100 plus, which we saw him do 2 years ago, all right, well, now you've got a bit of upside there.
We know on his day, too, he waxes with the best of them. He can be a Luke Ryan top opera. So a couple of things we know. We know that he has the bye. So how you want to play into that, I'm not really that concerned about that.
I'm not as fussed about his bye than the others,
Toughish run to start. I think consult your little thing.
Yeah. Let's have a look. Hawthorn.
But I believe it's a toughish run.
It is. Yeah. It's actually a very tough run.
Yeah. So this is something that I looked at. Is that enough to put me off? Maybe not. I want to see what happens.
So he goes Essendon.
I counted 3 there. I didn't have a third point, but you'll be able to.
That's all right. The audio listeners wouldn't have known until you gave it away. So Essendon, Carlton, GWS. So Carlton and GWS are tough. Port Adelaide after his bye. And then he's got an easy matchup against Geelong. So Essendon and Geelong are a good. Geelong's a positive matchup, but the 3 in the middle there are hard.
You think about the kind of players, and unless opposition teams. And we're spending a lot of time on Sicily, so apologies if you don't care. But you think about the kind of players that Sicily's going to be playing on this year. If they've got Barras,
you've got Frost
Battle,
still there,
Frost. Right? So maybe all these guys are not all going to play in the back. They're not all going to play in the back line, perhaps. But Sicily can play tall and short, I think. What I'm just thinking is, like, you list off the 2 top key forwards in any team, and then you go down to the third.
Oh, yeah. It doesn't matter.
As
long as he's not the top 2... big defender. I think is the main thing.
I don't think he's going to be. Why would you go out and get?
You've got 2 players. You've paid a lot of the draft capital for Battle, especially.
All these guys come with the asterisk that it's the 6th of January. We're going to wait.
Yeah,
we're going to see.
We'll watch them in the preseason and stuff like that. But I think put Sicily on your radar. I think there's risk. Obviously, we know with Sick Dog, there's risk every season, but he has the ceiling, and I think it's a good one. Good shout on the early matchups as well. All right, let's go to another player. Again, we're talking a few lowly owned players. Trent Rivers is a guy I wanted to put on the agenda.
You're going to be left up it without a paddle, I reckon, mate. If you go there, you are going to be in strife.
You might be.
Don't go Trent Rivers.
You might be crying a river. Cry me a river. Anyway,
no, I got it. Yeah,
you got it. Okay, so Trent Rivers. The thing here is the role change. So last year we saw him move into the midfield.
Yeah.
And in a team like Melbourne, who had a horrible season, by the way, last year. They had a lot of players down on their averages. And in the 15... so he moved there in round 15, and from that point, he averaged 88.9 in 10 games, and he did it on 74% time on ground. Like, that's low time on ground. And that was at 64.5% CBAs. Now, Petrarca missed all of those games.
Yeah.
So there's a flag already.
Yeah.
Oliver only missed 2 of them. So...
It's enough of a flag with the Petrarca thing. I've essentially, if we've identified the exact same stats in our independent research, it's probably a a larger flag than just a mini flag, isn't it?
So what do you think his ceiling could be? Like, say he goes from 70% TOG to 80% TOG. That's a big difference.
It's a big difference, but he's not going to get the CBAs that he did last year, I don't think.
Yeah. You think that like Melbourne's going back to Petrarca, Oliver, Viney dominating in the midfield, or Petrarca playing more forward? Like,
I don't know whether they're dominating, but I know they're dominating the time.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like dominating the time. Yeah.
Well,
like
so if those guys that you listed are all 70+% CBAs, there's not a room for another guy to be 70+.
Petrarca, I'd put an asterisk, a question mark there.
They do everything they need to do to please old Christian after what happened last year.
Yeah, I mean they should, but what they should do and what they will do, it might be two different things.
So
because they need scoring as well.
Yeah. You want to see him as a midfielder? Is that so? That's
yeah. I think if he can get close to that 50 to 60% CBAs, and I see that time on ground come up, I would need the time on ground to be up. And I don't know, it's going to be hard to assess that in the preseason game.
You can't.
So
I thought you want to see him flowing off halfback.
We're nailing the river jokes.
It was more of a subtle one.
Yeah, he might be someone that if he let's put it this way, if he's starting on the bench, I'm not interested.
Oh no, don't!
I see him in the first centre bounce,
don't lie to the people, mate. You're not going to be oversimplifying.
The defense is tough, man.
You're starting in the first centre bounce in a practice game. You're going to read into that?
No, I mean like consistently, like every quarter, he's the first. He's not like how Matt Crouch always starts on the bench, and his time on ground is low.
I'm saving you from yourself, Mitch. You cannot trust that in a.
He's behind someone like a McKercher, behind someone like a Sicily for me.
No, you don't.
But it's enough. I'm keeping an eye on it.
Is he in your team now? He probably is. That's why you're so...
No, he spent a little bit of time in there. He came in...
Dabbled, dipped his toe in the water.
Yeah, he came in for the shower. Yeah, nice. But now
he's... the shower thing? Let's go back to that. Creep.
I was going with the water, but...
Oh, right.
Anyway.
The link.
But now he's out. He's out again.
Yeah, he's got to be out. You don't get a genuine look in opening round, and I'm not trusting where he's playing in the preseason games to... Especially if... You've got Petrarca, Oliver, all these guys playing as well. I don't think so.
All right, last guy we want to talk about in the Premiums Defenders podcast is a bit of a favourite of ours, I'd say.
I like this guy.
Jaden Short. Yeah. Short goes long is the guy here. Now, he's a pretty popular player.
Is he at Mitchman currently?
He is at Mitchman player at the moment. He's 28.6% owned.
Yeah.
And a bit of a spoiler alert for sometime in the future. I don't know if I can say this actually. No, forget.
No, you can't say this.
No, forget it. Yeah. But anyway, I've done a fair bit of research on Jaden Short and...
You almost butchered that, eh? I could see where you were going because I've got it in my notes here too.
Yeah.
And I was no, he's going to fuck this up.
No, it hasn't happened yet. But anyway, Jaden Short, I think he's value, and I am fairly confident, and again, I don't like to lock myself into things this early in the preseason, but barring something unforeseen, I think there's a strong likelihood he ends up in my team in round one. I think there's too many opportunities for him to improve this season. We can start by just the fact that Richmond are going to suck.
Yep, they'll suck.
The ball's going to be down there. They've also lost a third of their team's points.
Yeah.
Literally. A third of the team's fantasy points has gone in 6 players leaving.
Yeah.
And I think a player like Jaden Short is in the perfect position to mop up all those points. Do you agree? Do you buy into the narrative that Richmond aren't going to score enough fantasy points for a player like Short to be a worthy pick? Because that is a genuine concern for a lot of people out there.
Let me say, I think it's more of a genuine concern when we discuss Tim Taranto in a little bit, because of what you said about how sucky Richmond's going to be, the fact that we anticipate that he'll also take kickouts.
Yep.
There's going to be points in the game where Richmond are just getting like shagged so hard that they're just going to park the bus or a little bit of chippy action here. So I'm big on Jaden Short, and it's not only me; it's a lot of people. So
yeah, I think there's also a thing with Richmond. Richmond haven't scored well or haven't had premiums in the past. Now, well, firstly, the half back line is the place that they have had people score well, but also this is not the same Richmond team. No. Are you with me on this? Obviously,
100%.
We've lost Dustin Martin. We've lost Daniel Rioli. We've lost Liam Baker.
We were playing a game style that was winning us premiership, so we're not going to continue to play that game style.
We don't have the talent to play that game style. And And we also already started to see it last year. So in the first 11 games, uncontested marks, we were down at 75 uncontested marks per game. In 2021, we were at 80. So even when we were good, we had more than that.
Yep.
But then it started to correct itself. The last 10 games, we were at 79 uncontested marks. The last 5 games, we were at 85 uncontested marks. And Jaden Short's average in that time went from 81 to 86 to 90. So the more uncontested marks there were, the more his score went up. And the other thing I want to really highlight with Jaden Short, even in those last 5 games where he's averaging 90 points, 76% time on ground. So his time on ground is low. He's been as high as 86% time on ground. And you can't tell me that Daniel Rioli leaves, Dustin Martin leaves, Shea Bolton leaves, all these guys, Liam Baker, all these guys that are walk-up starts every single week, and he's not going to play more time on ground. You're going to have these rookies on the bench a bit more. And just by the nature of the more senior players, they're going to have to be on the field more. So I think that bodes well for his scoring. I want to ask you about Richmond's game style. Do you see them adopting a bit more of a North Melbourne chip-to-chip kind of play style?
Look, I don't think that we're going to see something that is like ridiculously different to what we've seen. There might be
extreme.
Yeah, there might be some alterations, but I think even with those small alterations, there's enough there that there's going to be ball for those uncontested marks that you mentioned. So I think you've done a good job. I don't think there's any shortcomings.
I was gonna say he's not gonna come up short in our team, so you just got in there really quick.
Sorry, it's competition now. We gotta live it.
I gotta get quicker because I know you're thinking one. I know you've got one coming. Anyway, so what do you think he can average? Do you think there's a chance for him to be a top 6 defender?
I think there is in the perfect world. I know when you do your projections, you do a sort of basement,
a low and a high,
and a high projection, and I think at the high end of the projection, there's an opportunity for him to be a top 6 forward.
I see a world where he's 100 plus.
There's definitely that world there. The only thing that makes me think about it a little bit is just that we had so many great defenders last year. So is that the case again this year? Yeah, no, for sure. So I think he's an easy pick. No early buy around. And he's got St Kilda in the first 3 rounds as well. So he's got a couple of tougher matchups before that, but at least you'll have an understanding of, okay, where's his floor, where's his ceiling, and then you'll be able to make an informed decision to trade him out after a few rounds if it's not cutting the grass, if he's coming up short, and or if he's going long. You can go long into the season in your team. That was painful. All right, let's move on. We're going to stop it there, guys, and we're going to talk about some mid-prices in the next podcast, but how many of those guys are in your team currently?
How many of those guys are in my team? 3 of those players are in my team. Should I reveal? I mean, I did say it at the time, but Dale, Sicily, and Short are currently sitting in my team.
I've got Sicily and Short, so...
Okay, so you're going a little bit cheaper in the defence as well, which is definitely a play, I think, as well. I think Colby McKercher is definitely training with the boys. Trent Rivers, in and out of the showers. That's about it.
I like that you're running with that, man.
But, a lot of those expensive guys... Sheasel's maybe the only one I can see myself if I have an influx of cash somehow that someone just throws a bit of money my way. If you want to, I might be able to pay up for him. But yeah, it is tough. It is tough, and obviously lots of water and river to go under the bridge.
Yeah, nice. There'll be more. I anticipate that we'll do some more Defender podcasts as the preseason goes on because lots is going to change.
Yeah, okay. I thought you were looking up for a joke.
No, it wasn't.
It seemed not. Yeah.
No, just. Like I said, no more fucking around, mate.
We're serious.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that will do it for us today, guys. Stay tuned for the next podcast where we're going to talk about some mid-price options, the cheaper guys that are maybe a little bit more risky, maybe not. Maybe we've just got some guns in that position there, guys. If you enjoyed the podcast today, give us a 5-star rating and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your pods. Like and subscribe on YouTube, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.